We're going to use examples from the school, but hopefully this will be widely applicable. I really like the previous warning in the last awesome talk that principles are what they are. You probably already know them, and so when we get to the Q&A, talking about the praxis, how to do them is much more important to me. And so in some ways, if you were here last year, I'm giving you a kind of progress report on how things are going, and hopefully some ideas that are applicable to whatever ministry, business, or area of Orthodox advancement you're involved in. I also like what I've heard already, which is all of us as Orthodox Christians are doing God's work in the world, that there's no one person who's doing it. Let me start by saying that I think that if one is to have success, and I want to say I've only held one job since I was 20. I started teaching when I was 20. I used to be able to introduce myself as the youngest person in the room. I used to have a job all the time that I was too young for, allegedly. Amazingly, time and tide will solve that problem for you. Here's what I've learned. I've learned that if you can't state what you intend to do in one sentence, you will fail. Father Chad, what do you do here? Great. See, it's not hard. We are debt-free classical Orthodox education K through 16. That's what we do. We can unpack all those ideas, but whenever we get together and someone has a good suggestion, or we'll even have a donor call us and say, wow, you guys are really good at teaching, why don't you try this? And it doesn't fit the mission that I just described, then that's for somebody else. That's a calling for somebody else. That's a good thing for someone else to do. We're not a church, for example. I'm on the Parish Council of St. Paul, a far harder job than directing a K through 16 institution because there isn't. We're the only K through 16 institution in the world. So as a result, everything we do is correct for K through 6. No, this is a problem. But we know what we're doing and how we intend to do it. We have a philosophy of play that comes out of thinking about education from an Orthodox perspective, beginning with college, as it would have been understood and was understood, the idea of college in Constantinople before the fall of Constantinople, backwards all the way to what we call kindergarten. So that includes a philosophy of play. So everything we do is intentional around a mission statement. And every person that we hire on the team, and we've grown more slowly than we could have, because if we add many more than 50 students a year, and in a city like Houston, we could add many more than 50 students a year, in the college, in the high school, in the elementary and middle schools, we would ruin the DNA of the institution because even the teachers we brought in wouldn't capture the Orthodox vision of the school, the classical vision of the school, and what it means to be K through 16. You can't go out and hire someone and say, what's your experience in K through 16 education? Really briefly, what do I mean by this? Imagine you're running a university and the academic team got tired of compensating for high school and complaining endlessly about what high schools were doing. And they rethought high school and left university education and started doing college and high school together. What would they discover? They'd start complaining about 8th grade. And those stupid middle school teachers, who aren't stupid at all, the problem almost never are the teachers. And so you drive down further to middle school, what you would discover is, 6th grade, man, it all goes wrong in 6th grade. And so what we've done is press all the way down to K4. Our youngest paying student is K4, but then because we want to be an Orthodox community, we have subsidized, and by subsidized I mean almost free, nursery care for all of our faculty. So far, we haven't, we have a cap on that. We can only afford so much. But so far, we've been able to provide so that you can come to our campus. And yesterday, you could have come to our campus and seen a college student helping an infant, helping a high school student, helping an elementary school student. And then if you're lucky, it's the day that my 82-year-old dad is puttering around talking to someone as well. Because we know what we're doing, we're able to integrate nicely. The other thing that I'll say, and it's kind of skipping ahead, yesterday it turned out, I asked the pilot, I got on the plane with our CFO and the First Lady, and we flew out, and they closed the airport 10 minutes after we left. And I started getting texts, hooray for wireless on planes. I was writing a couple of articles and doing other things. I started getting texts from the community saying, we are now surrounded with water. So they were surrounded with water to the point that cars were broken down all around them, about a mile away in front of a Whataburger. If you don't know Whataburger, go to Texas. They caught a 5-pound bass in the road. It was just there, and they were fishing. Unfortunately, we lack the initiative. See, hire people with more initiative that they have fishing poles ready to catch bass in front of your school. But the school was surrounded like a moat, and none of the students could go home. Period. The parents couldn't pick them up. Now, here's an interesting thing. I couldn't have gone back to deal with the issues there if I wanted to. We had landed in LaGuardia by the time it was clear that things had just gone utterly sideways. Too late to raise up leaders when your school is surrounded by floodwaters in Houston and you're standing in New York. Nor should you have a team that has to continuously be on the phone with you to find out what's going on. I made none of the decisions yesterday. And it was a great success. Everyone got home safely. We appreciate your prayers if you were there that evening. The waters receded, the parents picked up. College students came over and helped feed kids from the dorm space next door. The CFO volunteered her granola squirreled away in her office. They watched movies. They had fun. The exhausted faculty gets the day off today, though most of them have come back to dry out the classrooms, some of which flooded. What did I do? Nothing. What of those decisions did I make? None. Was I there? No. Did I know what was going on in reality? Was I getting the phone calls from parents? Yes. What did I do? Send them to the team. By having raised up leadership, some of whom I've worked with since they were 18 in my office. So I hired an 18-year-old and told her, you're going to run the Honors College European trip. And that's it. Walked away. She would come occasionally with questions. She ran it. She now runs marketing. If you're looking at the brochure in front of you, it's put together with Megan Muller, whose first project in an honors college was running a European trip for 45 students and 6 to 8 faculty members. If you've worked with someone that long, 10 years, 15 years, and you know how they respond to pressure and you know how they can perform, you don't have to worry about what will happen in a crisis. When I was a little boy in West Virginia, they told this story about leadership. And it was a farmer who went to hire summer help. And he asked each young man in that era how they would do. And they all said nice things because they wanted the job. It was during the Great Depression. And he finally got to one kid who seemed awesome, excellent, family. And he said, what about you? And the boy said, I can sleep on windy nights. This is an odd answer. But the guy hired him anyway because he liked the family. One night in West Virginia, we get flash floods. There's a flash flood coming and high winds. And the farmer was awakened, and he got up, and he went to grab the young man to button down the farm for the storm that was coming. And he couldn't get the boy to wake up. He thought to himself, that young man is fired in the morning. And he went outside, and what he discovered was that that young man had buttoned down the farm every night as if there was going to be a crisis. He could sleep on windy nights. It was okay. The farmer had some chagrin, realizing he'd been warned about the quality of this young man, and went back to bed confident that everything had been done that could be done. If we want to lead and we want to see orthodoxy flourish, and more than my institution, I want to see an Orthodox America. And after that, the world. I need an evil lair, I think. There it is, but it's not evil. If you know what you're doing, you're able to achieve things that many people would think would be impossible. Houston is the most diverse city in the United States. But the diversity of Houston schooling is horrific. You don't have to know much about the history of the United States to know why that would be true. Houston schools are enormously segregated. Our school is effortlessly not segregated. These are random pictures that we're showing you. We are exactly the demographic profile of the city of Houston, which is what you would expect if you're serving the city of, but almost never is the case. Why? Because the team knew what the goal was and went out and executed it at the deepest level. And so this communicated itself effortlessly to parents who came to visit. Monday, we had someone visiting our campus, and a student came up to this person for whom this would be important and says, wow, I won the Greek prize. It was in 3rd grade, 5th grade, something like that. Only the student was a Guatemalan refugee. I wish that we had given that student $5. I guess that would have been evil. But if you do what your mission is about and you do it consistently, then you don't have to pay someone to write up a charming anecdote for the right people. Those things will come forth naturally. Terrible things will also happen naturally because those are real too, like people will visit on the day of the flood. But you are what you are, and no amount of marketing or imagery can change it. This is a new building. We're working on a new building right now, 10 classroom building, as we try to grow incrementally. It's Bishop Basil coming to bless us. Hats look terrible on me. I always look like Gomer Pyle, which also dates me. If you get that reference, you're old. That's all it means, or you know pop culture pretty well. These are first round of standardized test results on the ERB for the elementary school. I'm going to make 2 points about these. These aren't even where we would like to be. We would like to do better than this, but none of our students ever take multiple choice tests, and we didn't teach for the test. So we just did a first round of testing, and it came out well enough that we thought we'd show people anyway, but we'll show you these results. One of our seniors headed off to Rice University this year in the most competitive year for Rice. We now have students in every major university. In Texas, we have a student of color in Georgetown in the pre-law program in their 2nd year, and we have had the president of the freshman and sophomore class at Baylor University for the last 2 years. So can this be done? Yes, it can be done, but I want to double down on this. I didn't do this. God did. God did. And if you don't believe that God works, then we're not Orthodox Christians. So why doesn't God always work in us in these areas? Because we are not willing to follow God's principles and be willing hands and feet to incarnate these principles. We need business leaders, like we've seen, who incarnate biblical principles in what they do, and they do it with excellence. But then we also recognize, as in all the talks we've heard today, that it's God who does it, which brings with itself both a great comfort and humility. People are always asking, what's the plan for forming something like the Torrey Honors Institute at Biola University? I remember sitting with a yellow legal pad at the Bible Institute of Los Angeles as an Orthodox Christian saying, what we need is dialectically based education that challenges everything, and proposing a plan on 2 pieces of yellow legal paper to the provost. This is not an impressive presentation, by the way. I don't advise doing this. But we talked and talked and talked. We started the program, and he said, if you can get 16 students for a year, over 4 years, you can keep your job. If you can raise the money for your job next year. What an opportunity. If I pay my salary and recruit students that cover my salary on top of it, I can keep my job. Good. This is actually a great opportunity if you're 30. And so, 31, somewhere in that zone. And so I set out to do it. And having set out to do it, who did it? God. Because if somebody raised their hand and said, how can I do that? I don't know. But I know this. Biblical principle number 1, which I learned from my grandfather with an 8th grade education, is know what you're doing and do it. Hard. So we had 32 students the first year. And how many of those students did I personally call and recruit? All of them. How many of the classes did I teach that first year? Essentially all of them. How many were in my home every other day? Essentially all of them. Because the second principle is you lead from the front. I like hearing from a CEO who actually knew more about the product and putting it together, I'm guessing, than a lot of people who work in your company. Is that about right? Early days, anyway?
Early days, yes. There's a lot smarter people than me.
Yeah. Oh, good. Thank you. I'll give you your, I guess $5 wouldn't matter a lot, huh? Right? I'll give you your $5 theoretically now and say this. The other principle I was going to get to is always hire people who are better than you as much as is conceivably possible. I worked for a boss once that the minute you demonstrated you were a better public speaker, that was the last public speech you ever made. The minute that you demonstrated that you had a faster pitch in a particular area, that's the last time you gave that pitch. I have heard from my daddy, who was a pastor for 50 years, and then a head of a denomination, and then left it all to become Orthodox, having seen the true light. He's a great man. He said this: being the dumbest guy in the room when you're in charge means you're the smartest guy in the room. And that is a good thing. In the early days, when you're the only employee, you are self-evidently the smartest guy in the room. But it's tiresome to be able to have faculty meetings in the bathroom. Decision-making was very quick. Should we change the amount of Fairy Queen we're currently reading? The answer to that question is always yes, by the way. You should always read less of the Fairy Queen if you can, according to students. But I could decide immediately. By the time I got done hiring people at the end of the process at Torrey Honors at Biola, we had 17 faculty members, full-time faculty members in the humanities. I couldn't get anything decided because they all knew more about everything literally than I did, and I tried to make decisions based on consensus. It was much harder to make quick decisions. There's a downside to that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But there was a good side to it too. We were better then than in the first days. Now I want to pause and say I've been gone now for 7 years. And Torrey Honors was just made by the relevant group the #1 great text program in the United States. But I've been gone for 7 years. That's success. If you as a parish priest are setting up your parish so that the next priest becomes, you have like priest of the year? Do they give you like, it's like going to a fast food restaurant, they put up a little plaque, priest of the year in the Greek Archdiocese. That's what you want to do. And that shouldn't bother us and doesn't bother me. And so there's a leadership principle in there. So the value of team is so obvious that I feel sad discussing it. But I'm not going to teach math the way Melissa Nakshu can. And when our math program begins winning prizes, as it should, we do both college level math and high school level math better than any college or university I've worked with. It will be Melissa Nakshu who made that possible. Not me, for sure. So how do you find and cultivate good team members? First of all, you have to define the mission. This is two students who are now with us in college. One student who headed off to A&M, I think, Hope?
No, she went to Torrey.
Oh, Torrey Honors at Biola. Actually, they all stayed in-house, sort of. These students in high school are studying what we know we're going to study because we have a defined mission. And two of them, the man and the woman on either side, are now college students who yesterday were pitching in to help our community and who work inside. He works with our maintenance group, and Cassidy works with marketing, so that we don't have to hire people who don't know our mission or have to be cheesy and pretend to know our mission. These are people that we educated over the last 5 years and are now with us in college who live our mission, who live orthodoxy. By the way, what percent of our student body when they start are Orthodox? We're in the city of Houston, buckle of the Bible Belt. 80% of our students aren't Orthodox. Many, many conversions. If you want to see many conversions, set up an undergraduate program near an evangelical school. Set up a K through 12 school and minister to parents. Don't proselytize. Don't be bad. Don't put anyone down. Be Orthodox. And when a parent comes in and says, this happened to me, man, y'all aren't even Christian. Idol worship and stuff, this is really bothering me. We had a long conversation, and I was, if you work inside of evangelical context all your life, my goal is to do unto others as I wish that they had done unto me. And Biola, I owe them everything. They made my career possible, so hooray for them, and hooray for the wonderful people that are still at Torrey Honors. And I thought, the good side of how Biola treated me as an Orthodox Christian, how can I do that for these people here? And so we had a long conversation, but at the end of it, they came back and said, well, here's a thought. What if there just weren't icons everywhere? See, I tell you that 80% of our students aren't Orthodox, and not all of our teachers are Orthodox. But they agree to the mission and the values of the Orthodox Church. What do you think happens occasionally at a local Russian Orthodox parish, Rokor Parish? We had 2 of our faculty just received last year into the Orthodox faith. If you're living the mission and you're speaking the mission and you're doing the mission daily, when you have 2 Mormon kids who through the Catechism of the Good Shepherd pioneered in an Orthodox way out of Los Angeles under then Bishop Joseph, now Metropolitan Joseph. We have Mormon kids who know all of morning prayers and say them every day and have memorized the Nicene Creed by 5. Does that make them on their way to Orthodoxy or bad Mormons? I'm not sure what it does, but if I were their stake leader, I would worry more than they seem to about this. But you're a good school, and you know your mission, and you're not putting anyone down particularly. You're for what you're for. As you minister to students, no one has any difficulty knowing whether we're Orthodox. When this person said this about icons, my response ultimately had to be, maybe we're not for you. Because we're not going to become iconoclasts. We settled that a while ago. Like really long time ago, even before the American Civil War, we made this decision. This is like really old decision. It's in our DNA. I want to tell you something. By being honest, forthright, this is one of our leaders inside our parent group and is a happy, productive parent who has, by the way, not changed their mind on any of the topics we talked about yet. Serve and know your mission, and also be willing to lose people. We do lose people. That's a happy story in the sense that it resolved itself and we could agree to disagree. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes people self-select out because if you show up, one reason we named the school St. Constantine is it offends all the right people, left and right. So I say, I did a Ph.D. in Plato, immediately a whole group of people hate me. And the right people. And when naming a school St. Constantine, people ask, and there are really good, positive reasons to name it that. But at one point, I was just sitting there noodling with names, and I thought, oh, all the people that I get along with on the right who would hate what we're doing will be offended by the name St. Constantine. And all the people on the left who will hate what we're doing and who are our friends, but shouldn't be involved in this, they'll hate the name too. This is the very name for us. St. Constantine, pray for us. Just that sends people screaming for the exits inside of American higher education. The other thing you have to do immediately is establish structure without becoming bureaucratic. And this is exceedingly difficult in starting a nonprofit. The goal in many for-profits or nonprofits, if they're not careful, is if you have a problem, hire someone to solve it. I was once at a place that had developed a problem with bureaucracy for that very reason. And we brought that up, and so they hired a vice president to get rid of bureaucracy. That wasn't quite their title, but it was like that. Like a vice president for simplifying the number of vice presidents or something like that. And I served on a committee to get rid of committees. We produced a large binder which went with all the other large binders from other committees. How many of those things were implemented in our giant organization? Anyone want to guess? None. But we felt better. Wonderful moment in Great Expectations where Pip and his friend have spent way too much money and they're about to go under. What they do is they sit down and they make an unbelievably detailed budget that will get them out of trouble if they follow it. They immediately leave and go party because their problem has been solved. They spend all the money they don't have because tomorrow they're going to go on the really rigorous budget. So you have to establish enough structure so that you don't become like Pip in Great Expectations. Particularly visionary leaders, if they're not careful, are the people who can get something started but come to miss the good old Cavalier days where you could just do things. And that kind of person, above all, has to restrain themselves and hire competent people to establish structure to produce, particularly in finances and personal accountability, enough structure that first they become unnecessary to the organization, but necessary and helpful to it. I'd like to think St. Constantine is better off if I don't die tomorrow, and that the organization would be in better shape if I don't. But I know this, in its 5th year, it would continue if I were to die tomorrow. Where the founding person becomes good for the organization, but no longer necessary to the organization. And that means building up enough procedural structures, particularly in finance. And this is where I pause and say, our founding board chair, Steve Kane, who you can read his awesome business credentials. I really regret that he's not here, and he regrets not being here. He was on the plane that was 10 minutes later than the one I got on, facetiously. No, he couldn't even get out of his house. He and Melissa to get to the airport, which was closed in any case at that time of the day. All the flights were canceled. And so I regret that I can't stop and start talking about strong board leadership. But if you're at a nonprofit, let me say 3 things about boards, and we had talked. First of all, if you have a dynamic, charismatic leader, which I believe is necessary if you can find one in a startup, you must have a dynamic, hardcore board chair who has the authority to fire the dynamic leader. So if you have a startup and that startup got funded by angel investors, that's clearly a person that people want to believe in. But do they have the accountability to a board? I'm going to guess in biomedicine that one thing that went wrong with the fraudulent companies was there wasn't a strong board with oversight and skepticism about the claims of the charismatic, talkative founder. That about right? It isn't always, but it often is. Yeah. Do you have a skeptical board? Second, does the board demand absolute transparency from the organization? I think this is true, as their CFO is here, that within hiring you, which was an important step forward for us as an organization, to clean up the messes that you make in the first year of starting up an organization without a CFO, that we moved over the next 2 years to platinum status for transparency on the largest, nonprofit clearinghouse. You want to know anything about us, you can find it out. Some other organizations I've worked with and for, nonprofits, are not there and they're 100 years old. Why would your organization not want to be fully transparent in terms of finances to donors? Here's a thought. If you're a donor, don't give your money to an organization, including a religious one, that isn't totally transparent about its finances. Where'd that $1 million I gave go? Well, if you give us $1 million, we'll be able to tell you, I don't know, within $1, maybe within a penny at this point in our development. If you can't find that out quickly, easily, and maybe on the internet without telling anyone you're looking, why would you want to be not transparent about money? If the government wants to clobber you, they will. Transparency isn't going to be why the government clobbers people. Think about religious organizations in the United States. How many would still exist if they had been transparent? Many, many, many. And then the third thing that I'll suggest to you is make the board broad and big as quickly as possible as the organization moves from founding state to larger state. And that's the process we're in right now. We're not where we need to be on that front. And so I won't be the one who does that. Our dynamic board chairs, really, Steve and Melissa Kane, will be the persons who do that and make sure that that occurs. And that process is happening. But let me pause and say something else. What did I say our mission was? Classical, Christian, Orthodox. Which do you think in the history of higher education is the thing likely to go first in our mission? Orthodoxy. Why can't we just be Christian? Or why can't we just be a really, really, really good secular school? We'd be able to charge $35,000 a year for the same education. We've never turned away a student for inability to pay. We give accredited, great text, 4-year baccalaureate degree, and we'll graduate our first 2 students this year, $9,000 a year all in. And I told Father, you send me seminary graduates, we'll turn away no one. Want to go to seminary here, we'll turn away no one for inability to pay at the college level to finish their baccalaureate degree. So vision, what is it? That's not the same as what you do. Where are you going? Here's where we're not going. We're not going to open an airport. We're not going to become Baptist. Knowing what you're not going to do. Oh, I'm sorry. The final thing I wanted to say about board structure, I see I was running out of time and I missed it, was that to remain Orthodox, we have a plurality of priests on the board for any decision related to our charter. If you don't believe that educational programs can be hijacked, read a very important book called The Dying of the Light, which is a sociological study of how religious universities and colleges were hijacked in the United States. On my watch, we will not compromise with the teachings of the church. I'd rather close. I'd rather the school closed. And that's not purely hypothetical in the culture we live in. Education is a tough space for values. Where are we going? We can only know that if everything in the organization is intentionally crafted to the mission. How would the Orthodox run a playground? Well, it's a good question. I'm not sure we know the answer. We keep working on it. But if you walk onto our playground, every item on the playground has been designed in such a way that we think, if St. Basil came, he would not be ashamed. And we could explain to him why that is the way it is. Next, where are we headed? From our very beginning, we want to replicate ourselves nationally in every airport city in the United States to provide affordable K through 16 education for every person in America who wants it, but it will be definitely Orthodox. We get partners all the time who call me because of my interfaith and interdenominational work who say, we'd like to start a St. Constantine for Baptists. Great, you should call someone who knows how to do that. You can't do what we do outside of the true light because it would not work. Or we haven't thought it through deeply enough. That's not a put down of anything else anyone is doing. That's what we do. And so we know where we're going if God helps us to get there. We don't want to have 5,000 students on our central campus. We intentionally bought property that can only fit 500 to 600. When we're done, there are 250 students. Why aren't we at 500 now? First of all, we're missing a building. But we wouldn't have built it to start with if we could have. Why? Because of the DNA of the school. We have to train people to do what we're doing. Where are you going? Where have you come from? Are you true to your roots? And finally, and I've already alluded to this, there's no success without a successor. Which means the first day I started working on the St. Constantine project, I began to think about who the next president of the St. Constantine School would be. And in a couple of cases, I've had former students who are Orthodox call me on the phone and say, man, I'd really like to work at the Houston campus. And I've said, yeah, you really would be the best fit for us imaginable. And you're the right age, having finished your Ph.D., that about the time I retire, you might be president of the St. Constantine School. So don't come here. Here's a school, sometimes not even an Orthodox school, that's in the classical tradition. Why don't you go there and learn the hard way, totally outside of the way we're doing things, so that we don't become corrupted through our own self-hiring. Learn how we do things and come back later when we have an opening. If you seed enough future presidents across the country, giving them career guidance as they go, when you do pass away or retire, the organization flourishes. It isn't that terrible business chart where things fall off a cliff when the key man dies. So men and women all around the country have called me, I want to work at St. Constantine. No, you can't. Go learn the ropes somewhere else. And then eventually, as we began to develop branch campuses, we'll say to people internal to us, go away from us, go develop this branch campus, show entrepreneurial success so that the board can come back to you and promote you from within. Leave to grow. How many priests are planning for their successor? I realize the bishop picks the next priest, but what if you always could sleep on a windy night in terms of your parish? How many corporate CEOs are not just insured, but are prepared so that their heir is an easy guess, or 4 or 5 easy guesses where it's hard for the board to choose? That's better still, because you don't know what crisis we'll be in and what kind of CEO we'll need inside that crisis. But then finally, none of this has anything to do with why we do what we're doing. An organization must always return to what's the thing? And the thing are the two students from the nursery who came to visit me yesterday, no, 2 days ago, and just played inside the office, who are the children of vice presidential level people down the hall that I knew when they were 18. That's success. As they destroyed my office rapidly. I can't say no to them, right? Oh, you're destroying that valuable object. That's so cute. Success is when you're in a meeting, it happens all the time to me, and I make a suggestion, and everyone says, that's a good suggestion. We think we should do this, and it's better. Success comes when your dad can sit on a couch in the center and realize that one day he was in an ice cream shop with his friend who was an executive at Wegmans Food Markets. His boss was Bob Wegman. That means you're kind of the boss. And my dad said, we got kids, we should start a Christian school. And so they did. And that's where I met Hope in 10th grade. And Dad can see what he did. And he doesn't have a job there. And he doesn't do anything for us. But keep us true to our roots and be wise. That's success. Because we exist to be Orthodox, classical, Christian, K through 16 education, pursuing arete, virtue, wisdom. With what? Leave it to somebody else to mark it through fear. When America is Orthodox, St. Constantine gets Harvard, and someone else can have Yale, and those will be good days. And those are the days I live for. Thank you. I'll take questions if you have any. You have a vision book in front of you that gives you more details about the school, about which I have said a lot, but in one way, very little. Where I always get asked this, we have 250 students. All of our high school students are enrolled in accredited college and take accredited college classes in high school. And we have currently 11 full-time college students in our first dorm space. So if you know somebody who wants to come from out of state, we can now provide for them. The dorm space now, by the way, is owned not by the college. We do everything as entrepreneurially as possible, unlike our competitors. We make money on the dorm space as opposed to lose. And it's $500 a month if you come. So questions if you have them.
I'm just curious about your process in choosing people to be on your board and what sorts of qualities you are looking for and what that looks like.
I'm going to give you 4 things because I studied Plato, and 4 is always good. But if I forget the 4th, that's also the beginning of the Timaeus, so there'll be an internal Plato joke to it. So 4 things. First of all, what do they need to know? The mission statement of the school. And where we're going, and be on board. Nothing's better than hiring someone to be on your board that says, you're perfect, now you have to change. It's then second, important to hire board members that when they discover inside your mission the way you have to change to be faithful, are forceful and will give you that information. So first, they know your mission. Believe it or not, tons of nonprofits simply put people on the board because they have the means. Do they know the mission? No. They hope to get a donation. Be on our board. You're not going to get a donation if they don't know your mission. Why would you? You're, in fact, using someone. Using wealthy people is no better than using poor people. It's evil. Second, they have to be forceful and opinionated so that when you have board meetings, people give you real stuff. Third, what do boards do? Put this in an educational context. They pass the budget, showing good accountability. They hire and fire the CEO, in our case, a president, and they follow what Stuart Morris, the founder of Stuart Title, it was the last independent title company until it was just sold for $1 billion to Fidelity. Stuart Morris is 98 years old, founded Houston Baptist University, told me this: give, get, or get off. So you get the mission, you're opinionated, you can give feedback about the mission, but you don't micromanage. You know what a board does, which means if the president is otherwise doing a good job and you don't like the math curriculum in 7th grade, be quiet. As a board member. Remember, the board member is only a board member when? When the board meets as a whole. When I meet the priest to whom I confess, who's also my boss as a board member, is he a board member when he's sitting with me having lunch talking about problems? No. The board is only the board when it meets as a whole, not as an individual person. Hi, I'm a board member. I'm calling to tell you what to do about 7th grade math, or you should hire my friend, Bill. No, you're not the board. You're only a board member when you meet in a group with the board. So the other thing I'll say is, how do you pick board members? Have pre-board training, board training. Before we started, we had an expert come in. Our donors, founding donors, had an expert come in and tell us, because in fact one of our board members has a Ph.D. essentially in how to run a board. And we had board training before, board training during, board training after. If you don't want to go to board training, you don't want to be on the board.
I do have a question, but just on that topic, there's also universities where you can get certified to be a board member. It's largely made for sitting on public boards usually, and it teaches you all sorts of things about compliance and like goals of the board and things along these lines. But universities do have programs that you can go to get certified to.
And it's a wonderful thing, yeah.
It's not required, but it is something that I have highly encouraged because I've learned a lot.
Let me pause and build on that and say, this is why, just like hiring faculty, you grow a board incrementally and you're constantly rotating people out. So you both have people who aren't board members currently, but could be if you were in an emergency, that have wisdom, and a current set of board members and field of people you're hoping become board members, so that sometimes I go to nonprofits and the same people have been on the board since we did decide the iconoclastic controversy.
So obviously you guys are having a lot of success in the Texas region. I know that you guys are thinking about branching out to other places. I had the pleasure of meeting a bunch of people at Lehigh Valley.
Yeah.
I think they're trying to start their own thing that's based on this model. What do you believe is something that won't translate to other geographical locations? And have you thought about how to address those concerns?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Let me say something. When I came to Houston, a big concern, becoming a provost is like getting interviewed, you wish the President of the United States got interviewed as much. Every faculty member tells you every opinion they have, and then they vote, and you have deans and chairs. And one of the biggest criticisms of my coming to Houston was that I had had great success where? Los Angeles, California. And if you want to pick two cities that are less alike than Los Angeles and Houston, good luck to you. Now, they're less not alike than people stereotype. Cities tend to be cities. And I'm from West Virginia, too. So I get asked this question all the time, and the answer is you have a 30,000-foot set of values that are the enduring truths of education and orthodoxy. And on those, sometimes people come and look at us like the college program and all the way through, and they say, oh, you're just Oxford for people that go to rodeos and have no money. Say, right. If I invented it, don't go. Yes? You never trust somebody in a field like education who suddenly, now we use new tools and new technology to reduce cost, and we're constantly innovating. My office has been accused of looking Victorian, but being the bridge of the Starship Enterprise. It has so much undergirding technology in it. But notice at this level, these things work cross-culturally. Our reading lists can change depending on the culture that we're dealing with. You know, how do we determine a great books reading list? When we begin with the truth of the Orthodox faith. We are the great text program that reads the Eastern Fathers. You want to read the Eastern Fathers? Come to our college. Second, we are teaching people that will exist where the language of power is English. So we read those works that had disproportionate influence on the creation of the English language and the development of modern science. And we work for numeracy. It's very simple. Notice that could shift from place to place. If we went to Ethiopia, for example, which I would love to do, we would start with Aksum and move forward. That would be a different reading list, though because of the prevalence of modern science and liberal forms of Republican government and Marxism, it would not look as different as you think. Because when I was in Mongolia talking to the Department of Education after the Soviet Union moved out, they were dealing with Marxism, Neoplatonism, huge amounts of evangelism from cults. And so our reading list was much more relevant than one would have believed, but we also wanted to help them recover Mongolian culture, which the Soviets had destroyed. So yes, that can evolve. The other thing is, of course, a place like a rural area or more rural suburban area is going to be a different student set. And this is where you bring people on the ground and you don't tell them what to do. You have your values and your method. But I'm sorry, it's a horrible example for which don't tell Megan. McDonald's is successful in part because they won't change things except when they have to change the menu. In which case, if they go to a region that the standard McDonald's menu doesn't fit, they add things to the menu, but what they don't do is get rid of the things that are universal, like the cleanliness of the bathrooms. Walt Disney is another role model for me, one of the great geniuses of the 20th century. And notice Walt's very Missouri cartoon vision, where you could never have done a study and discovered, yeah, what people in the Depression are waiting for is an hour-and-a-half cartoon about Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. But because he tapped into cross-cultural things, and because it's animated, those are easily translatable. But notice, if you watch Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in Russia, you don't necessarily hear it in English. You can hear it with excellent Russian voice actors. So that, by pushing down, we're also teacher-centered. What percentage of our faculty teach? Everybody hired. If you draw a full-time check from us, what percentage teach? At college and university, anyone want to take a guess percent of the budget that goes to teaching? 20%. Yeah, it's better than that. It's about 38% of every tuition dollar, 33 to 38. We have eliminated all of that. 100% of our people teach something. And so if you do that and push down, let's say in the Lehigh Valley, and you hire Lehigh Valley people to teach Lehigh Valley people in a Lehigh Valley way, inside the constraints of being classical, Christian, and Orthodox, by golly, you can't fail. Because here's what I was told once. I can't say the place because it was a non-disclosure. But one of the largest online schools in the world, I want to learn from them. I really do want to learn from them. Came, and I said, I can't mentor somebody through a screen. I can do the back office through a screen, and I can do info dumps through a screen. So we do. But how do I disciple? Would Jesus have discipled Peter online? Now, I met the person that helped me get my start online through email. I'm not discounting that. But when I wanted to be mentored by him, I got on a plane and flew to the University of California, Berkeley. Because I had to sit with him and learn what Philip E. Johnson thought about the world with skin on. So when I asked that question and I said, how can I do Shakespeare in Ohio farms? It's where we wanted to go. Without being there, he said, well, you're an elitist. Farmers in Ohio don't need Shakespeare. And I said to him, here's the deal. I'm from West Virginia. When I was a little boy, colleges came and they would do things for us like dig ditches. Man, that was the one thing we knew how to do. And then they would be our friends. And I was a precocious little kid. And I read a denominational magazine. It was still in print back then. And I was described as a sociologically and economically deprived young person. I thought I'd made a friend. Ichabod on that. I don't think the glory of the Lord was ever there to begin with. So what I'm saying is, what if they had brought us Shakespeare and done it in a bluegrass key? Because the teachers would have been people from Clinton and West Virginia who changed the world. What if they had been Orthodox? And what if the mountains of West Virginia had rung with the sound of the chant we heard last night? My great-grandfather built a church with his own hands. West Virginians can do that. Do you know what we need? We need the true light to fulfill the glimmers that we have seen. And that's how we do it, I think. Sorry, you got me worked up. Do we have... I get that from my dad. My dad said I should have become a preacher. And then my philosopher friends say, well, really, you're just a philosopher that knows how to sneak philosophy by people's radar. So I don't know which is true.
That's preaching.
Yeah.
Although it's about the liturgy, your community is more like a church than many churches.
Yeah, but we're not a church.
I understand.
And that's really tense for people. Many an Orthodox school, now I'll take to meddling, dies because of the failure to understand the genius of St. Basil. I have a whole talk here that I'm not going to give you, but I'll point out this. When the Patriarch of Antioch faced the civil war in Lebanon, what did he do? He started a university on the grounds of a monastery, but he did not control it. He immediately had a diverse faculty and a diverse board and ministered to people, because the real church follows St. Basil and lives the true life of the faith in front of people. And if we do that, eventually the emperor will convert, and that'll be an amazing thing. You know what I want to see? I want to see every CEO in America Orthodox. Because if every CEO in America is Orthodox, there will be a great revival that will occur. Sometimes for bad reasons. Sometimes people became Christians in the empire for bad reasons. Because orthodoxy worked. Wouldn't you rather have too many converts that you have to catechize better, thank you, Father, than almost none? And I bet that's the end. You're giving me the stop now or I'm going to not have lunch and I'll hate you. Look. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you.